originally released as a development device in 2016, so aimed at folks who make software primarily, not at the general public. The HoloLens, made by Microsoft, was a fairly innovative device that looked like virtual reality headgear, but which allowed folks to interact with graphical elements overlaid on a transparent surface on the lenses so that they seemed to be positioned within the real world, so-called augmented reality. This functionality relied upon some of the tech Microsoft had developed for its earlier Kinect accessory, which allowed Xbox owners to play games using their bodies instead of more conventional controllers. It used a camera to figure out where people and their appendages, their arms and legs, were in space. And that helped this new team figure out how to map a person's living room, for instance, in order to place graphical elements throughout that room when viewed through the HoloLens lenses. So stuff could appear behind your couch, pop out of a wall, or seem to be perched atop a table. The HoloLens was not the only option in this space, as several other companies, including other tech titans, but also startups like Magic Leap, were making similar devices. But it was arguably the most successful at the time in the sense that it both developed this augmented reality technology fairly rapidly, and in the sense that it was able to negotiate collaborations and business relationships with entities like NASA, the US military, and Autodesk, in some cases ensuring their hardware and software would play well with the hardware and software most commonly used in offices around the world, and in some cases showcasing the device's capabilities for potential scientific, defense, and next step exploratory purposes. Like many new devices, Microsoft positioned the HoloLens early on as a potential hub for entertainment, launching it with a bunch of games and movie-like experiences that took advantage of its ability to adapt those entertainments to the spaces in which the end user would consume them, having enemies in a game pop out of the wall in a user's kitchen, for instance, or projecting a movie screen up on their ceiling. It was also pitched as a training tool, though, giving would-be astronauts the ability to practice working with tools in space, or helping doctors in training go through digital surgeries with realistic-looking patients before they ever got their hands dirty in real life. And the company leaned into that market with the second edition of their headset, which was announced and made available for pre-order in early 2019, optimizing it even further for enterprise purposes, with a slew of upgrades and pricing it accordingly at $3,500. Among those upgrades was better overall hardware with higher-end specs, but it also did away with controllers and instead reoriented entirely toward eye and hand tracking options, combined with voice controls, allowing the user to speak their commands and use hand gestures to interact with the digital things projected over the real-world spaces they inhabited. The original model also had basic hand tracking functionality, but the new model expanded those capabilities substantially, while also expanding upon the first edition's fairly meager 30 degrees of augmented view. A relatively small portion of the user's line of sight could be filled with graphics, in other words, and the new version upgraded that to 52 degrees, so still not wall-to-wall interact-withable graphics, but a significant upgrade nonetheless. Unfortunately for fans of the HoloLens, Microsoft recently confirmed that they have ended production of their second-generation device, and that while they will continue to issue security updates and support for their existing customers, including the US Department of Defense, they have not announced a replacement for it, which could mean they are getting out of this space entirely. Which is interesting, in the sense that this is a space, the world of augmented reality, which some new entrants are rebranding as mixed reality, that seems to be blowing up right now. Two of Microsoft's main competitors are throwing a lot of money and credibility into their own offerings and pitching this type of hardware as the next step in personal devices. Some analysts have posited, though, that Microsoft maybe just got into this now burgeoning arena a little too early, investing in some truly compelling innovations, but doing so at a moment in which the cost was just too high to justify the eventual output. And now they might be ceding the space to their competition rather than doubling down on something they don't think will pay off for them. or they may be approaching it from another angle entirely, going back to the drawing board and focusing on new innovations that will bypass the HoloLens brand entirely, trying things from a different angle. What I'd like to talk about today are the offerings we're seeing from those other brands, and what seems to be happening and may happen in the near future in this augmented reality, mixed reality segment of the tech world. You're listening to Let's Know Things. I'm Colin Wright. I'm able to keep this show ad-free because of support from listeners like you. If you're finding value in what I'm doing here, consider becoming a paid supporter for the cost of a cup of coffee each month at letsknowthings.com. And as a thank you for your helping me keep this show solvent, you'll receive an additional bonus More Things episode each month. All right, let's get back to the show. I did an episode on spatial computing in the Apple Vision Pro back when that device was made available for purchase in the US in February of 2024. This device was considered to be a pretty big deal because of who was making it, Apple, which has a fairly solid record of making new devices with unfamiliar interfaces popular and even common, and because of the approach they were taking, basically throwing a lot of money at the thing and charging accordingly, around $3,500, which, if you remember, is the same price the second HoloLens was being sold for. But because of that high price point, they were able to load this thing up with all sorts of bells and whistles, some of which were fundamental to its functionality, like super high density lenses that helped prevent nausea and other sorts of discord in their users, and some that were maybe just interesting experiments, like projecting a live video of the user's eyes, which are concealed by the headset, on the front of the headset, which to me is a somewhat spooky and silly effect, but which is nonetheless technically impressive, and is something that seems aimed at making these things less antisocial seeming, because you can wear the Vision Pro and still see people, and this projection of your eyes when you're wearing the headset allows you to see them while they see your full range of facial expression at the same time. I've actually had the chance to use this device since that episode went live, and while there are a lot of weird little limitations and hindrances to this device going mainstream at the moment, the technology works surprisingly well right out of the box, with the eye and hand tracking elements working shockingly, almost magically well for relatively early edition tech. Apple is pretty good at making novel user interfaces intuitive, and that component of this device seemed like a slam dunk to me, for casual use cases at least. That said, the company has been criticized for that high price point and their seeming fixation on things like putting the user's eyes on the outside of the headset, rather than, for instance, investing in more content for the device and figuring out how to make the thing more comfortable for long periods of time. A common complaint with basically every virtual reality or mixed reality headset ever developed, because of the sheer amount of hardware that has to be crammed into a finite head and face mounted space. And that space also needs to be properly balanced, and it can't get too hot either, for perhaps obvious reasons. Those criticisms related to price are the result not of comparison to the HoloLens, as again, the pricing between those two devices is basically the same, but instead the result of what Meta has done with their mixed reality offerings, which are based on products and technology they acquired when they bought Oculus Labs. They have leaned into providing virtual reality devices for the low and mid-market consumer, and their newest model, the MetaQuest 3S, is a standalone device that costs between $300 and $400, and it has mixed reality functionality, similar to the Vision Pro and HoloLens. While Meta's Quest line doesn't have anywhere near the specs and polish of the Vision Pro then, and while it didn't arrive as early as the HoloLens, only hitting shelves quite recently, it does provide enough functionality and serves enough people's purposes, and at a far lower price point, that it, along with its other Quest line kin, has managed to gobble up a lot of market share, especially in the consumer mixed reality arena, because far more people are willing to take a bet on a newer technology with questionable utility that costs $300 compared to one that costs them more than 10 times as much. Interestingly, though, while Meta's Reality Labs sub-brand seems to be doing decently well with their Quest line of headsets, a product that they made in collaboration with glasses and sunglasses company EssilorLuxottica, which owns a huge chunk of the total global market for glasses and sunglasses via their many sub-brands, may end up being the more popular and widely used device, at least for the foreseeable future. The Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses look almost exactly like traditional Ray-Ban sunglasses, but with slightly bulkier arms and with camera lenses built into the frames near where the arms connect to them. If you're not looking carefully then, these things can easily be mistaken for just normal old Ray-Bans, but they are smart glasses in that they contain those two cameras on the front alongside open-air speakers, a microphone, and a touchpad, all of which allow the wearer to interact with and use them in various ways, including listening to music and talking on the phone, but also taking photos of whatever they're looking at, recording videos of the same, and asking an AI chatbot questions like, "What type of flower is this?" and then getting an audible response. These things cost around what you would pay for a Quest headset, something like $300 to $400, but their functionality is very different. They don't project graphics to overlay the user's view, so in that regard, they function like normal sunglasses or prescription glasses. But if you want to snap a photo, live stream whatever it is that you're seeing, or ask a question, you can do that using a combination of vocal commands and interacting with the built-in touchpad. And while this is not the mixed reality that many of us might think of when we hear that term, it's still the same general concept, as it allows the user to engage with technology in real life, in the real world, overlaying digital content, easily accessed digital content, and internet-derived information and other utilities over the real world. And it manages to do so without looking super obtrusive, like earlier versions of the same concept. Google's Google Glass smart glasses come to mind, which were earlier versions of basically the same idea, but with some limited graphical overlay options, but in a form factor that made the wearer look like an awkward, somewhat creepy cyborg. Snap, the parent company of Snapchat, has a similar offering, which originally leaned into the same "these look just like glasses but have a little camera lens in them" strategy, though with their newest iteration, their Spectacles smart glasses product has reoriented toward a look that's more like a larger, clunkier version of those disposable 3D glasses that you might get at the movie theater. So they're not exactly inconspicuous, but they do offer much of the same functionality as Meta's Ray-Bans, alongside some basic graphical overlay functions. A lightweight version of what the Vision Pro and Quest offer, basically, in a much smaller package. These new spectacles are only available for folks who sign up for the company's developer program at the moment, though, and are purchased not as a one-off, but for $99 a month with a minimum commitment of 12 months. So the price tag is quite a bit higher than those Quests and Ray-Bans. Interestingly, Meta's Reality Labs recently held an event in which they showed off an arguably more advanced version of Snap's spectacles called Orion. These things are being pitched as the be-all, end-all mixed reality solution that every company is trying to develop, but which they cannot develop yet, at least not at scale. They look like giant, cartoony glasses, in that they're shaped like glasses, but they're comically oversized glasses, and they provide many of the same benefits as today's Quest headset, but without the large, heavy headset component. So these could theoretically be used in the real world, not just in one's living room or office. The company announced this product along with the caveat that they cannot make it on scale yet, because cramming that much functionality into such a small device is really stressing and straining the capacity of current manufacturing technologies. And while they can build one of these glasses with its accompanying wristband and a little controller, both of which help the glasses do what they do in terms of compute and the user interface, for about $10,000 per unit, they could not today build enough of them to make it a real sellable product, much less do so at a profit. So this was a look at what they hope to be doing within the next decade, and basically gives them credibility as the company that's already building what is next. Now it's just a matter of bringing down costs, scaling up production, and making all the components smaller and more energy efficient, which is a lot of work that will take years, but it's also something that they should, theoretically at least, be able to do. To be clear, most other big tech companies should be capable of building really snazzy, futuristic one-off products like the Orion as well, especially if they, like Meta, offload some of the device's functionality into external accessory hardware. The Vision Pro has offloaded its battery into a somewhat clunky, pocketable appendage, for instance, and most of these devices make use of some kind of external controller to make the user interface snappier and more accurate. But Meta is attempting to show that this is the direction they see wearable technology going, and maybe our engagement with the digital world more holistically as well. It's easy to imagine a world in which we all have these sorts of capabilities built into our glasses and wristbands and other wearables, rather than having to work with flat, not mixed reality screens like computers and phones all the time. Especially once you see the tech in action, it becomes very easy to imagine that kind of future, even if that tech is only presented as a not for sale proof of concept. One aspect of this potential future that Meta is forecasting is already leading to some soul-searching, though. Some students at Harvard modified a pair of Meta's Ray-Bans to use facial recognition and reverse image search technology, so they could basically look at a stranger, then quickly learn a bunch of stuff about them, to the point that these students were able to do this, go up to a stranger and pretend to know them, and talk about their work, and tell them their spouse's phone number. A bunch of details that made it seem like they knew this person that they'd only just met. All of which is pretty wild and interesting, but also potentially frightening, considering that this is basically doxing someone on demand in public, and it could be used, like many other tech innovations granted, to enable and augment stalking or kidnapping or other similar crimes. None of which is destiny, of course, nor is the success of this product type. But there does seem to be a lot of interest in what these gadgets seem like they offer, especially as the prices drop, and as more entrants carve out space in that relatively lower cost facet of the industry. And that's a facet that Apple is reportedly planning to enter soon too, with a new edition of their Vision Pro that would cost maybe something like half as much as the first one, or maybe $2,000, and possibly smart glasses and maybe even AirPods with cameras in them, meant for release over the next couple of years. So it may be that the early divulgence of these next step devices, showing us where these things might go with these higher priced, smaller audience initial editions, could allow us to predict and prepare for some of their negative externalities before they go completely mainstream, so that when they finally arrive in their finished form, we're a bit more prepared to enjoy the benefits while suffering fewer, though almost certainly not zero, of their potential downsides. The book I'd like to recommend today is called The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor. This is a book about intelligence, and in particular, non-human intelligence, and the way we might respond to it if and when we discover it, for example, in another creature that lives on Earth, like the octopus. It's set in a near-future, very believable world, and it features characters that struggle with this concept and this idea in various ways, while also presenting some other, what I found to be very uncomfortable potential destinations for aspects of our global economy as it currently functions. Now, if any of that sounds interesting to you, consider picking up a copy of The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor. Let's Know Things is a listener-supported show. I don't make any money from ads, only what listeners contribute by becoming paid supporters at letsknowthings.com. If you're not in the position to become a paid supporter at the moment, consider leaving a quick review wherever you get your pods. Those help get the show in front of more people and lend a hint of credibility to independently made shows like this one. A huge thanks in advance, whatever shape your support might take.